transgender mice. They're turning all the mice transgender. And all your tax dollars are going toward it. So Trump talked about this in his latest speech, and the latest fact check that's going around calling Trump and all of his supporters dumb are all the left and Democrats claiming he doesn't know what he's talking about, and that the verbiage was transgenic mice, not transgender. And I posted this the other day. This is basically how it goes. Trump calls something out, makes some statement that sounds so outlandish it can't be true. Leftist media and Democrats come out with a fact check claiming that it's false. Then they quietly come back with a correction quietly and change it to needs context. And then when you actually read the gist of it, the whole story, not just a clickbait headline, is eventually proven right. Trump, or someone on the right, Republican, that they're claiming don't know what they're talking about and are making stuff up. So, I'm going to pull up the article, and we're going to go over it from NBC. That way, they can't claim I'm picking just Fox News or some far-right biased source. And we're going to read it, because he's right, what they were doing, hormone therapy. They're doing hormone therapy studies with taxpayer dollars on mice to help aid in studies that can help transgender individuals, is the gist of it. And let me just say, I'm not even necessarily against hormone therapy studies, because I think they can be beneficial, not only for transgender, but more. I'm not really in support of it for transgender, but you're doing the study. Not only transgender people aren't the only people that benefit from hormone replacement therapy and such. So I'm not even necessarily against the types of studies, but I'm against the left coming out with their typical smear campaigns, acting like Trump and his following are some crazy conspiracy theorists that are just making stuff up. I get it. A lot of it seems like that for normies, because a lot of it does seem so batshit crazy, there's no possible way it's going on. But let's be a little open-minded, people. They're doing shit that's batshit crazy, okay? So, let me share a screen here and pull up the article from NBC News. All right, so what do we got here? First of all, let's go over the headline here. Fact-checking Trump's anti-transgender comments in his address to Congress. The president claimed the government has spent $8 million making mice transgender. First of all, that's not what he said. He wasn't literally saying they're turning mice transgender. It's they're doing hormone replacement therapy studies to aid in how it affects them, so they can use that in how it would affect transgender people and people taking hormone therapy. You can say it literally references transgender. We're going to go through it. But so first of all, the fact that all these things already came out saying he didn't know what he was talking about, it's transgenic mice, it's all over X, all the Democrat leftist accounts are calling Trump supporters and Trump stupid, not knowing what they're talking about, and they don't know what they're talking about. Surprise, surprise. So that headline alone, if you just see that, fact-checking Trump's anti-transgender comments, and you don't click on the article and read, you probably just look at it and be like, oh, see, they fact-checked Trump. He was making shit up. He lied. So that's what all media try to do. With clickbaity headlines, they hope people don't read them. But let's see. We don't need to read this whole thing because it just kind of says what he was doing in the speech, but I'll read a little bit of it and skip around to the parts where it actually talks about this. So, President Donald Trump mentioned the transgender community half a dozen times throughout his address to Congress on Tuesday, though trans people make up an estimated 1% of the U.S. population. So, yeah, they're using that little caveat, which is the same way they like to kind of cope and just ignore the men and women's sports issues. Whenever you bring it up, their go-to is just, it's such a small minority, it's not a big issue, it doesn't matter. There are women literally being like abused, beaten, hurt, injured by allowing men to compete in these sports. So even if it's happening in one place, it's an issue that should be talked about and not allowed, because it's just batshit crazy. Like, it shouldn't be allowed, given on the, even if no girls were being injured. It's fucking insane. So, less than 15 minutes in, he noted that he had signed an executive order declaring that the federal government will only recognize two unchangeable sexes, male and female, and another order banning trans women from participating in women's sports. Yes, people voted for that. You anti-Trumpers need to wake up and realize you are now the minority, okay? He won both the Electoral College and the popular vote, first Republican president to win the popular vote in like 20 years. He has a mandate. All of the country moved the needle to the right this past election. A lot of y'all are doubling down and still think you're the fucking majority. You're not, okay? So maybe look in the mirror and judge your side a little more. That's what annoys me about partisan politics. People always just judge the other side. I judge everyone because I think you should judge your own side even more if they're doing fucked up stuff. Because that's a bad look for you if your side is doing some shady shit. So you should be wanting to call your side out just as much. But maybe I have that view and many have the view like me, because a lot of us don't necessarily identify with any one political party. And a lot of these people, you know, the vote blues no matter who types, it doesn't matter what their candidate's saying, doesn't matter their platform, just matters that there's a D. That's my team, that's who I vote for, other side bad. Drives me nuts, but that is the world we live in. I do think that might be a little more prominent in the boomer generation, the older generation, but it happens in all generations. But I think in, 10, 20, 30 years, when older generations are no longer here, we might see a big mix-up in the political landscape, because, I don't know, right now there's a lot of Democrats doubling down, and I'm sorry, but people do not want this transgender stuff going on in women's sports. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about this part too, so maybe we will read most of this, because there are Democrats on X, like, laughing about this. This freaking article, man. Alright, he then introduced Peyton McNabb, who played volleyball in high school at North Carolina, and Trump said planned to play sports in college until her girls' volleyball match was invaded by a male. Trump said the player smashed the ball so hard in Peyton's face, causing traumatic brain injury, partially paralyzing her right side and ending her athletic career. This is true. Look it up. It's still unclear whether the player who spiked the ball and hit McNabb during the September 2022 match was trans. McNabb has said in interviews that she and her teammates were aware of a trans player on the team, but that player's name has not been shared, and she has not spoken to the press. Okay. Since then, McNabb has become a paid national advocate for state laws prohibiting trans students from playing on-school sports teams that match their gender identities. Yeah, that should be common sense. And look at this cope that they're using, trying to act like they don't know if it was was the transgender individual. Trump then said, trans women are hurting other sports, referring to a case in which trans woman finished a long-distance cycling race and set a record by 5 hours, beating a cisgender woman. Trump appears to be referring to Austin Killups, a trans woman cyclist who did win the 800-mile Arizona trail race in May. I actually meant to look that one up because that's another thing. I myself even thought that sounded insane when Trump said beat the women by 5 hours. I was like, 5 hours? That's gotta be a mistake. Well, I'll look it up here shortly, but NBC isn't correcting it in this, so I'm guessing it is true. That's insane. That alone should kind of tell you there's a big difference between men and women physically. And maybe we shouldn't be competing against each other. 5 hours? Man. All right, so let's skip to this part, making mice transgender. Trump brought up trans issues again about 20 minutes into his speech, in what many on social media have described as one of the most bizarre moments of the address. He said Elon Musk was helping to find wasteful government spending, including $8 million for making mice transgender. It's unclear what Trump was referring to, though it appeared to be a subcommittee hearing led by Rep. Nancy Mace last month titled Transgender Lab Rats and Poisoned Puppies, Oversight of Taxpayer-Funded Animal Cruelty. During her opening remarks, Mace referred to a report last year from the White Coat Waste Project, a watchdog organization that claims to stop government spending on animal testing, that found more than $10 million in taxpayer funds had been wasted to create transgender mice, rats, and monkeys in university labs. The report included 8 studies that received funding from the National Institute of Health, with most of them studying the effects of hormone therapy. Yes, hormone therapy is what's used for transgender individuals. Among other things, like I said, that's why I'm not necessarily against it, but some of these studies specifically, I'll get to those in a second, some of them specifically mention people with gender identity issues. One of the studies the effects on testosterone and estrogen on wound healing, with the goal of improving care for trans people and developing new approaches for treating millions of patients with chronic wounds. So again, that's why I said I'm not necessarily against it, because this information could be used on individuals that are just using hormone therapy, not necessarily transgender, but still it refers to actual transgender people. And another uses mice to study. Another uses mice to study how estrogen and anti-estrogen therapy affects immune response to an HIV vaccine. Trans women are disproportionately affected by HIV. Why is that? Because they're men. With one study from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention finding that 42% of transgender women surveyed in 7 U.S. cities in 2019, 2020 were HIV positive. Shocker, because they're really just gay dudes who like dressing up like women. HIV is prominent in the homosexual community. The third and fourth studies mentioned the report examined the effects of hormone therapy, with one specifically focused on how testosterone affects fertility and whether infertility related to testosterone can be reversed if the patient stops taking it. The remaining studies are reviews and editorials on improving studies and clinical support for LGBTQ patients. So it specifically says for LGBTQ patients, so not wrong. The White House released a statement about Trump's comment Wednesday that referenced most of the above studies and a few more, including one that examines the effects of gender-affirming testosterone therapy on breast cancer risk and treatment, and another studies the role of estrogen the role that estrogen plays in how gender influences asthma. None of the studies the White House referenced were specifically focused on making mice transgender, but rather on the effects of hormones. Yeah, duh, okay? Like, this shouldn't even need to be explained. This is the play on words they always use. They're not literally making mice transgender. Well, I don't think anybody's claiming they're just making mice transgender for fun. They are specifically doing hormone therapy studies to aid in studies that would give them information for transgender individuals. And Trump's trying to slash everything that is transgender. So they're saying you don't need to spend tax dollars on studies that just support transgender issues. So it's exactly what was being said. They like to use these play on words. And then lo and behold, when you read the whole article, like, that's literally it's literally like what he was talking about. So these are the games they like to play. They're at it again. They're always at it. And they love to use these, little play on words, or then when you try to defend it, that's not what he was talking about. That's not what he meant. He's too dumb. No, it's not just him. He's got a cabinet of people. They don't want money going toward this stuff. And hey, I'll agree, like, taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going toward it. But, like I said, I'm not necessarily against those types of studies, because I think studying the effects of hormones on people can be beneficial. And what ticks me off is they're still doing studies on this stuff because they don't know how it affects people. But they're willing to just throw kids on puberty blockers and give them surgeries and other pharmaceuticals, hormones, when they don't know they haven't done the studies yet. Why are we allowing it if you haven't done the studies yet? You don't know if it's going to have permanent damage, but you have no problem parading out there claiming that it doesn't do permanent damage. Same thing with the whole COVID. They all claimed it didn't have any negative side effects, but they didn't know. Well, some of them knew, but they didn't know. They weren't being honest with it. So, like usual, take Trump's remarks, either take them out of context or just blatantly claim he's lying. Quietly do a little fact check where you go from saying false to needs context. AKA, yeah, he's technically right, but this is what it's for. So they can use that little caveat, use the play on words, and which they kind of look correct, while they can also say, no, Trump's not, that's not what Trump was saying. So, like usual, they do this with everything. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. What do you think? Share. At Trad West Podcast on all platforms. Till next time, Trad West Podcast out.